Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is about the global distribution of the corona vaccine. The United States has agreed to buy 500 million vaccines from Pfizer for global distribution. This will be sent to the African Union as well as 90 lower income countries over the next year. The distribution will be channeled through the UN Global Alliance called COVAX. With this initiative, America's overall purchase will be 800 million vaccines. Last month, President Joe Biden endorsed waiving intellectual property rules at a meeting at the World Trade Organization. This was to promote vaccine production and equity. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the move will restore America's global influence and soft power. You may be paying a higher tax rate than a billionaire. Jeff Bezos took a $4,000 tax credit for his children while hardly paying any taxes. ProPublica's investigation released Tuesday showed that the top 25 wealthiest Americans have paid little and sometimes nothing in federal income taxes. Billionaires who submit their taxes paid less than those making $45,000 a year. Senator Bernie Sanders said that the story showed that the rich have money, the rich have power, the rich have lobbyists, and the rich do not pay their fair share of taxes. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted the ProPublica's findings underscored the importance of instituting a wealth tax. She's been calling for a 2% wealth tax instead of the income and capital gains tax, which the wealthiest legally avoid paying. It's worth noting that Muslims already pay 2.5% of their annual wealth in charity in the form of zakat. This is in addition to all the other taxes that they pay. In the meantime, Attorney General Garland vows that investigating the billionaire tax leak will be his top priority. A detailed analysis on this ProPublica investigation is coming up later tonight in our show, so keep watching Muslim Network News. Empty prisons in America are being used in creative ways. Some sources say that there has been a drop in prisoners, but this has led to vacant prisons, which are now being repurposed for other tasks. In Connecticut, the prison population is 50% of what it was in 2008. There, empty prisons are being used as document storage facilities for banks and law firms. In Florida, one prison, the Gainesville Correctional Institute, has been repurposed as a homeless shelter. The facility now offers medical care, financial aid, mental health, and domestic abuse services. The shelter has improved property values and helped reduce chronic homelessness in the area by 38%. In North Carolina, vacant prisons are being converted into year-round farming and education centers, teaching at-risk youth discipline and leadership skills. A former correctional facility in Staten Island has been converted into a 69-acre waterfront movie studio. Over the last decade, 94 state prisons and detention centers have been shut down and repurposed in similar ways. Critics say ICE facilitates deportation of immigrants and commits human rights abuses. Thomson Reuters, which owns the Reuters news agency, provides data and information to its government clients. Reuters provided ICE access to a program that allows it to track and arrest immigrants on a massive scale. Internally, the company's shareholder will vote to assess the human rights impact of such software contracts. An organizer for the advocacy group Mijente said that the company had a responsibility to investigate these practices for human rights abuses. A statement from the company said it takes its role as a good corporate citizen very seriously. A Hindutva organization has come under fire in the United States for masking its prejudice with charity. Seva International describes itself as a Hindu faith-based humanitarian organization. Over the years, it has gained credibility and the trust of several large corporate donors. More recently, this has included Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, who donated over $2 million to Seva's fund to help India defeat COVID-19. Microsoft and Google have also encouraged their employees to donate to the organization and offered matching funds. But an investigation by Slate.com found that Seva International has deep ties to India's right wing fascist movement. Seva's social media posts show equipment raised for COVID relief has often gone to initiatives from other organizations with direct links to the RSS. The RSS, or the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, is a Hindu paramilitary organization and has been around for almost a century. It aims to establish India as a state based on Hindu supremacist values. The Slate.com report notes that the RSS takes inspiration from fascist movements throughout history. An RSS leader, Indresh Kumar, who appeared on Seva's social media post in relation to the COVID fund, supports Islamophobic legislation. Another Seva link to India's Hindutva movement and government is the RSS supported Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, or the HSS. The chairman of Seva International USA Board is also the founding member of the HSS. Parts of a law banning hijabs and other religious symbols in the Canadian province of Quebec have been struck down. The Quebec Superior Court said Bill 21 violates the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter is part of the Canadian Constitution. Bill 21 was passed in June 2019. It forbade all public sector employees from wearing religious symbols on the job. The law drew widespread criticism from religious groups and civil rights activists. They said it would largely discriminate against Muslim women who wear hijab. However, most of the other parts of the law were upheld by the court. Noah Aviv of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association said she was hoping that the bill would be struck down in its entirety. Critics of Bill 21 say it sends a dangerous message. They argue that it marginalizes Muslims further in the Quebec province, where Islamophobia led to a mosque massacre, killing 6 worshippers in 2017. They also say last Sunday's murder of a Muslim family in London, Ontario, indicates that Islamophobia is a problem in other Canadian provinces as well. Burma is on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. More than 100,000 people are fleeing their homes to escape conflict, are also facing starvation. Unrest broke out in Burma's eastern state of Kaya between the Burmese military, which has displaced the elected government, and rebel forces. This coup led to protests across Burma, followed by a brutal military crackdown. There are reports that the junta are laying landmines on public roads to prevent humanitarian aid from reaching the refugees. Without immediate international action, the United Nations warns of mass deaths from starvation, disease, and exposure. The state of Kaya borders Thailand. It is one of the several regions where the volunteer People Defense Forces have clashed with Burma's military. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. This week, Canada's reckoning with its colonial history was interrupted by its racist present. A terrorist attack in London, Ontario killed 4 members of a Muslim family and left a 9-year-old boy orphaned and injured. Are Canadians ready to take it upon themselves to confront Islamophobia? Let's go to Saleha Farouk, who's in conversation with Fareed Khan, the founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Over to you, Saleha.
Thank you. Today, we look forward to speaking with Fareed Khan, who is the founder of Canadians Against Hate, as well as being a human rights advocate and anti-racism activist in his own right. Fareed, thank you so much for being here with us today in light of recent events in London, Ontario.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Now, all of the victims in this horrendous crime were all innocent bystanders, but something quite unique about this certain attack is how children's lives were impacted and upended. We know that 15-year-old Yumna Salman was killed, and her 9-year-old brother, Fayaz, is currently battling injuries while hospitalized. What does it mean when such Islamophobic violence begins to touch the lives of children around us?
Well, I think it means the politicians have failed us. When the Quebec City mosque shooting happened in January 2017, Muslim community activists, anti-racism activists, myself included, approached members of the government, the federal government, and urged them to take decisive action, concrete action, take a national leadership approach to addressing issues of Islamophobia and hate in general. And what we got were thoughts and prayers, politicians attending vigils, and marginal response on the political level and the legislative level to addressing this very serious problem in our country. And the result is that in the past 4 years, since the horrific events in Quebec City, there have been 2 other incidents. One last September where a Muslim man was stabbed to death outside a mosque, and now this hate crime that occurred in London.
You talk about legislative action, and a lot of Canadians agree with you. What would that legislative action look like? Are we talking about getting Canadian institutions and community service organizations involved in increasing awareness about anti-racial discrimination, Islamophobic violence? What would that change look like, especially if it came from a top-down approach in the way that you describe?
Well, I think that community organizations are already doing their part to try and raise awareness and build bridges. I think that Muslim community organizations and various social justice organizations have been doing that. But the heavy lifting should not be left up to groups and communities because they work in silos within their communities. We need a national approach led by the federal government, working with provincial governments, the same way that they worked to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Hate, racism, and bigotry in this country are a pandemic. They've been around a lot longer than COVID-19, and Muslims know this only too well. Our community has been victimized after 9/11. It has been villainized. There have been attacks against Muslims, and particularly Muslim women are vulnerable. There have been racist vandalism at mosques repeatedly. There was a court decision that came out yesterday about 2 paramedics in Hamilton who basically ignored their responsibility to treat a Muslim teen who had tried to help a elderly member of his mosque when he was being attacked, and he was shot in the stomach. And these 2 paramedics basically treated it as if it was no big deal. Now, the media didn't frame it as an issue of bigotry or Islamophobia, but that's definitely what it was. So with respect to governments, it requires a national approach, it requires a national commitment, and it requires politicians to stop going for the photo op like they did yesterday, stop being hypocrites, which they are. I issued a press release today talking about the hypocrisy of the messaging from all federal leaders who are all complicit in promoting Islamophobia by both action and inaction. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked yesterday in a media conference, did he think that Bill 21 contributed to Islamophobia in Canada or in Quebec? And he said, no, it didn't, and he's not going to be intervening in that. Both Erin O'Toole and Yves-Francois Blanchet, gave these big speeches about fighting hate and Islamophobia, but they both voted against the Islamophobia motion M103 in 2017. And even Jagmeet Singh, who has been the strongest on fighting hate and racism, he has said that he would not intervene on Bill 21 until it reached the Supreme Court if he became Prime Minister. So no one's hands are clean on this.
Interestingly, in 2009, the police confirmed approximately 1,900 hate crimes in Canada, and those specific hate crimes targeting Muslim Canadians rose by approximately 10% from 2018. You yourself do a lot of anti-racism work in your community, and we're talking here about the short-lived solidarity statements from such Canadian leaders. To what extent do you believe that exclusionary rhetoric and exclusionary decisions on such bills like Bill 21 might contribute to Canadians feeling like it's okay to attack Muslims in broad daylight in Canada?
Well, of course, you hit it right on the head. When you get political leaders like the Premier of Quebec saying this is the will of the people support this, and he puts in place legislation that denies the fundamental human rights of racialized religious minorities, he's basically saying to his province, members of his province, you know what, go ahead and be racist, be Islamophobic, we've got your back. And then, when that bill came out, there was a poll done across the country, and surprisingly, more than a third of Canadians felt that the bill was okay at the time. So, you have that. You have right-wing media voices who are pushing Islamophobia. You've got certain right-wing politicians who are pushing narratives of racism. The Premier of Alberta has someone on his senior staff who denies the Indigenous genocide. When you have people like that out there in public saying things like they're saying, what it does is it enables and it energizes people who already feel deep prejudice towards minority communities. And Muslims have been on the receiving end of this far too often, and Muslims have paid for this racism literally in blood over the last number of years.
I really wanted to get your take on this when it comes to justice and accountability, which is the next step that people are looking forward to. Many people are urging that this level of legal accountability should include charges of terrorism or first-degree murder, and both these charges do carry 25 to life here in Canada. Tell me, how likely is this to happen, and is this a right preventative measure for the future?
Well, I've been watching the media conferences from the London police, and it's definite that there will be first-degree murder charges, 4 charges of first-degree murder and 1 charge of attempted murder. The terrorism charge needs to be added to that because far too often that part of the criminal code has been used in instances where Muslims have been caught conspiring. They haven't killed anybody, they haven't attacked anything, but they've been caught conspiring to commit acts, and they've been charged under the terrorism laws. In this case, this person was radicalized to a level where he decided to go out and kill people who were Muslim. He killed them specifically because they were Muslim, and that is an ideology. And I'll tell you, Muslims are feeling terrorized. I'm sure that you, as a woman, a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, are thinking about your safety now when you're going out. Muslims who are visibly Muslim, when they're out walking in public, are now going to be thinking twice about how they behave. And that is a feeling of terror, and therefore a terrorism charge is entirely justified in this situation.
The information in terms of how this individual was actually radicalized is coming out quite slowly, and unfortunately, many of us don't have all of the pieces to the puzzle. Have you heard anything in terms of the kind of information that he might have been privy to online in terms of hate groups, where he found that information, and why those groups were allowed to function online in Canada?
Well, I've only heard what I've seen on the media. I mean, clearly there was an issue of radicalization online. These things don't happen out of the blue. Rarely does someone get radicalized just minding their own business. There definitely had to be outside forces, either individuals or websites that he accessed, which caused him to do what he did. With respect to what happens on websites that are accessible in Canada. Unfortunately, a lot of these websites are not located in Canada, so there's no way for the authorities to charge the operators of these websites. However, one of the recommendations that was made by Canadians United Against Hate to the federal government was to put in place legislation which charged website operators, social media platform executives, and so forth with hate crimes under Canadian law if they are allowing that sort of material to be posted on their platforms, regardless of whether they're located in Canada or not, and where possible, use extradition treaties to get these executives to face the courts in Canada.
Critical insight there from Farid Khan, who is founder of Canadians United Against Hate, and as well as being a human rights as well as anti-racism activist himself. Thank you so much, Farid, for your leadership during this critical period for Canadian Muslims.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to provide some insight into some very disturbing recent events.
Back to Hena Zuberi in the news studio.
Thank you, Saleha and Farid Khan. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Earlier in our show, we shared the investigative story by ProPublica. How did ProPublica obtain this information? What is the significance of these revelations, and will it change the tax system in the United States? To address these questions, award-winning financial writer Brett Ahrens is joining Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for a detailed conversation. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Taxes of the rich are in the news again, but no, it is not about the former President Trump, but it is about the rest of them, that they are not paying their due share, but it's all legal. tax law allows them, but bad news is, or maybe it's a good news for the public, that ProPublica, not-for-profit organizations, somehow receive the tax record of 15 years for thousands of rich people, which shows they're not paying any tax. And that's what we'll be talking about. And my guest is going to be no other than Brett Arends, who has been with us before. He's award-winning journalist and a writer. He has been a columnist at Wall Street Journal and all that. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Brett Arends.
Great to be here again. Thank you for having me.
So share with us, what is this IRS bombshell?
Right. The first thing is, this is an absolutely fantastic scoop by ProPublica. I assume that they are going to collect a Pulitzer Prize, among other things, for this fantastic scoop. I don't know where they got it from. It is illegal.
They even don't know where they got it from.
No. It is, of course, illegal for someone to leak tax returns, individuals' tax returns, to the public. And I'm sure there is an inquiry at the IRS. However, there is an overwhelming public interest. And, there was the case of the Pentagon Papers many years ago, when similarly, documents that were illegal to be leaked into public were leaked relating to the Vietnam War. So this really fits that narrative. I don't know what the legal situation is. If they do catch the leaker will be able to say there is an overwhelming public interest. So it'll be very interesting to see where that goes. The substantive issue here is one that just doesn't get enough attention, particularly among the left and the media and people who ought to focus on it. I had a row years ago about this. The issue with the American tax code is not that someone earning, say, a lawyer who's earning $1 or $2 million a year living in, Los Angeles or New York. It's not that people like that, the upper middle class, the sort of working rich, are undertaxed. People in that bracket are paying 50% marginal tax rates. They're being taxed pretty much like they would be in Europe. That is not the issue with the tax code. It is not that high earners are not paying taxes. It is that the super rich, the people making billions with a B, billions a year, are not paying any tax. And that's because the tax code taxes income. It does not tax wealth. So what happens is, and this is what the ProPublica data scoop has revealed, is that if you are Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, or if you are Warren Buffett, the head of Berkshire Hathaway, or if you are Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, or if you are Mike Bloomberg, if you are someone whose wealth is counted in tens of billions of dollars, and your wealth goes up every year because your stock goes up, as long as you don't sell that stock, you are booking no income and you do not have to pay any tax. Years ago, it was explained to me how this works. Let's say you are worth $100 billion. How do you tap that wealth without paying tax? And the answer is simple. You go to a Wall Street bank and you borrow. You say, right, I will establish my $100 billion in stock as collateral, and I'll take out essentially, I guess, like a mortgage. I will borrow $10 billion and I'll pay 2% interest or 1% interest a year, and I'm not paying any tax because I haven't sold any stock. The problem with the entire American tax system, the total problem is that we don't tax wealth, we tax income. I find it very frustrating because when I try to have these arguments with people on the left and the right don't understand the problem. People on the right will say, look, taxes are very high. Someone making, who works all their lives and build up a career, I don't know, as a surgeon who's making $2 million a year and living in New York City is paying a lot of tax. And the answer is yes, they are. Years ago, I got into an argument with some people on the left. They were targeting Kim Kardashian and saying she wasn't paying enough tax. And I said, look, the problem isn't Kim Kardashian, because Kim Kardashian is making income. And so she's being taxed on income. The problem are the people like Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett. They are making billions with a B, billions, and they are not paying any tax at all because we don't tax wealth, we tax income. It would be very simple, straightforward to fix this problem, but I do not think we're going to do so, partly because of apathy, partly because of confusion, and partly because the vested interests don't want to do it. The simple solution would be to replace our income tax code with a wealth tax code. Elizabeth Warren moved towards this during the presidential campaign, but then she veered off into various different problems and all the rest of it. You could replace the income tax in America with a flat 2% tax on all of us, on our wealth, and it would basically pay for itself, and it would mean that Jeff Bezos, he has, $200 billion. That's fine. Good for him. He has $200 billion. He can write a check for $4 billion. That's 2%. At the end of the year, and that's his tax. And if you have $100, you write a $2 check. Everybody can pay a flat 2%. And because the shape of the wealth curve in America is sort of like a hockey stick.
Brett, you will be surprised, probably you don't know that your 2% wealth tax, Muslim community in America, we're about 6 million people or so, by faith, they're required to pay 2.5% of their wealth every year, no matter who they are. So left and right, there is something in the middle, which we are already doing. But of course, it is not in the tax code. That's an extra which we pay. So
I didn't know that. And that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it is on the wealth. It is not on your income. But whatever your wealth is, which is stayed with you throughout the year, you pay 2.5%. It is called zakat. It could be changed, but it has been normally this percentage. But tell me this. So you think that ProRepublica, whatever they have done, of course, it is going to give a lot of coverage to them, not-for-profit entity. So far, so good for them. But instead of who leaked it, where the headlines are, main story you like to be that instead of income tax, move towards wealth tax. Who else is with you on that, Brett?
Well, it's interesting. It is not an issue that gets enormous amounts of detailed conversation. People on the left are sort of open to the idea of a wealth tax, but they talk about, Elizabeth Warren was talking about 6% a year, which is essentially confiscation and is crazy. She essentially blew the argument. And when I try to argue with people on the left, they say, well, why should poor people have to pay 2%? And the answer is, well, someone who doesn't have any assets doesn't have to pay any tax. The part of the strength of the argument is that you could basically make it a flat 2% across the board, and you would essentially protect yourself against the argument that it is a confiscatory, or it's an envy tax, or it's whatever, just pure redistribution. It is very difficult to get purchase on this because people on the left say, oh, I want a wealth tax, but I want 6% or 10% on the rich and nothing on everybody else. And people on the right say, I don't want a wealth tax at all. Why should I have to pay a wealth tax? One of the frustrating things about discussing tax in this country is that whenever you talk about any particular tax change, you end up with people arguing against taxes in general. They say, well, you're just taxing wealth creation. Well, that's true of all taxes. The argument.
Don't you think, Brett, that there is a legitimate question if somebody is barely living, at 10,000, 15,000, minimum wage or something like that, getting 2% from that person, how the wealth of that person doesn't have a wealth.
No, so they don't pay any tax.
Okay, so there is a consideration. What is wealth? What is wealth then?
Well, I mean, look, put it this way. Everyone who owns a property in America pays essentially roughly 1% of the value of that property every year in property taxes. You can very easily put a 2% tax on stocks, bonds, and other financial wealth. Look, nobody is saying that you need to necessarily value someone's 12-year-old Honda with 150,000 miles on it and pay 2% of that. So, it's reasonable to say you have a certain exemption for personal property. You don't have to value your cufflinks. You don't have to value your clothes. But it is very easy to value. We already know where all the financial assets are. The US government keeps very close tabs on all financial assets. And indeed, there are punitive taxes. I mean, absolutely punitive, draconian taxes on anyone who keeps money offshore outside of the purview of government and doesn't disclose it. In terms of tax avoidance, one of the issues will be, well, wouldn't people then just, hide their money in gold or whatever? Look, stocks earn on average 6% a year more than gold year after year. So if someone is going to give up 6% a year in order to save 2% a year, that's just going to cost them money. If you keep it as a flat 2% tax on gross assets, then you minimize the risks of avoidance. You make it theoretically flat, but at the same time, very, very, very progressive in its application because wealth is so astonishingly unequally distributed. And I'm not making a point here about whether it should be. I'm saying Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and people like this have wealth vastly out of any consideration, any respect for what the rest of us live like.
So other than that particular focus which you have, Brett, in which I'm already paying 2.5% to charities, and but tell me this, out of my wealth, whatever it is. So is the IRS safe? I mean, could it be some hackers? Because ProRepublica doesn't know whether these are individuals who volunteered this information, leakers from inside, or it could be hackers. I mean, considering that hacking is, caused a whole pipeline toward the East Coast shut down, do you think IRS is safe from that hacking business?
That's a great question. And, I'm talking about taxes at the moment, but there is a very, very serious aspect to this story, which has nothing to do with the wealth paying taxes. Even though there is an overwhelming public need in knowing that, or interest in knowing that the people with the most money are paying almost no tax, it is nonetheless very concerning that tax returns of individuals have been leaked. If it can apply to a small number of very rich people, it could presumably apply to all of us. And that is a matter of concern because that essentially opens the door to identity theft, direct financial theft, blackmail, all the rest of it. So I agree with you that they need to find where this came from. And if it came from hackers, then that's going to be deeply concerning.
So the Colonial Pipeline guy says that it was just one password which they compromised and they were able to paradise quite a bit of things.
Yeah. And look, you and I were talking a while ago about Bitcoin. And of course, the number one purpose of use of cryptocurrency is for ransomware, for people like the people who shut down the Colonial Pipeline. That's how they get their money. That's how they get their paid their ransom, through cryptocurrency. So
but we learned one thing that is traceable. They thought probably it's not traceable.
Sorry, say that again?
But one thing which we learn is that the US government can trace where those Bitcoin went because they were able to recover them.
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing is, Bitcoin, what's interesting actually is that although the attention has been on Bitcoin and the US government has now got a much better handle on where Bitcoin, following Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies are being developed, have been developed, which have total anonymity. And of course, the issue with all financial assets, including cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin, is you can follow the Bitcoin up to the point where it gets converted into something else. I mean, as I point out time and again, the most anonymous assets are cash and gold, which are essentially untraceable. So if you convert, many years ago for an experiment, I put cash into a Bitcoin machine in London and used it to purchase a Krugerrand in America, which I had delivered to my office. And essentially, it was a seamless process. It was very easy to launder your money. So the more times that they track Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the more other people will come up with new ways of getting around that. So that's another story, and that relates to cryptocurrency rather than taxes.
Well, thank you so much, Brett Arendt, for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you for tuning into Muslim Network TV. As we say goodnight from Washington, D.C., we wanted to close by paying homage to the Afzaals, a young Canadian Muslim family destroyed by anti-Muslim hate and terror. in this Muslim Network special. May Allah grant them paradise.
A family always together. Together they were taking an evening walk. She is Yumna Afzaal, 15 years old. She left this world with her mother, grandmother, and her father. They loved each other, they walked together, they left this world together. Yumna was an artistic and a creative bee at the London Islamic School. Her mural in the school is now her legacy. She is Talat Afzaal. She is 74 years old. An artist and a teacher, she wanted to be a great grandmother. That will not happen now. She is Madiha Salman. She was 44. An aspiring PhD student, Madiha wanted to reclaim more natural environments for our world. Now, Canada will not be able to benefit from her potential leadership. He is Salman Afzaal. He was a physiotherapist. Every day he served others, caring for those in his community, his neighbors. He was a community builder, a father, a son, and a husband. He will no longer be able to spend his time in service. They all left their much-loved homeland of Pakistan, emigrating to settle, root, and grow, to give of themselves towards an even more beautiful Canada. They chose London, Ontario. Brick by brick, they built their lives, serving neighbors, strengthening a community. An evening family walks together, 3 generations side by side, forced out of the world by hate. They have left their young son Fayaz Afzaal in our care, a 9-year-old boy with a new and brutal burden. Despite his broken bones, he must lift and carry an unimaginable weight, the task of building a new Canada. Kanata, village, settlement, community. A Canada where everyone can walk. Walk alone, walk with family, walk with friends. Walk freely and walk safely. Build a new Canada, free of hate, full of love, with hope. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون